What is up? I'm Miguel Antonio, and you are listening to the Live and Create podcast. It's where I interview artists and entrepreneurs about what it means to live a great life and create great things. And before we jump into the podcast, I'd love for you to check out my band, Run With It. Here's a clip from our song, I Need a Light.
It was the middle of the night. My only friend was the highway. I just started to drive. No direction, only miles spent. I was losing my mind. Nothing more than tears and shaking. Where the moon was so bright. We used to spin and spin. I see my darkest days, see my darkest days. I see my darkest days, see my darkest days. I need a light, so bright and the sun seems dim. I need something that will not fade, held tight like the hand of a friend. I need someone that won't run away.
If you like what you heard, make sure you check us out at Run With It Band, at Run With It Band, everywhere you follow people at, or go to runwithitband.net. It'll take you to all the different links you want to go to, and there'll be a little button you can click for booking information. Now for today's podcast. On today's episode, we have Kelsey Cook. Kelsey, also known as KC from KC, has been playing drums since she was 10 years old and brings a wealth of experience to her craft. Hailing from Kansas City, she earned her percussion performance degree from Washburn University and completed the Summer Shot program at the Musicians Institute in LA. Before moving to Nashville, KC played as a snare drummer for the Kansas City Chiefs Rumble drum line, adding her rhythm to the heartbeat of Chiefs fans. During nearly 10 years in Nashville, she performed at iconic venues like the Ryman Auditorium, the Grand Ole Opry, gaining invaluable insight into the music industry. Now she's returning to her roots, reigniting her music career in the Kansas City area. It's a great episode. Enjoy.
The Live and Create podcast.
So you did a stint in New Orleans before Nashville.
Yep.
Is that? I did not realize you've been all over LA, New Orleans, Nashville. So let's just dive into that. So you left Kansas City, obviously, like Kansas City's home for you. But so you went to New Orleans. What spurred that move for you as an artist?
As an artist, it was not as important. It was more of a relationship that took me there.
Gotcha.
But I did get into the music scene, and I realized you can't just go in and be like, I'm here, have me, because they've been doing their thing for so long. And I was young, and I auditioned for some bands, and it was great. But the music scene itself, just being able to flow into that scene that's been there for so long, was really difficult. I don't know if it was my age or my gender or what it was, but it didn't feel very accepting. Not that it's bad, but it was more of like I needed to earn my spot, earn my respect. And unfortunately, I was not as serious in my music career at that time. I did create this logo in New Orleans, so I guess.
Hey, you got something out of it.
So I guess I was being somewhat productive, but I wasn't making much money. So unfortunately, I moved back to Kansas City after like a year or two in New Orleans. So it was a short little stint, but yeah.
Now, Nashville was more art driven for you, business driven?
Yeah. And I had,
What spurred that on? Was like a connection that you had built already that got you out there, or you're just like, fuck it, let's go to Nashville?
Yeah, I actually went to the NAMM convention, which that's like for all musicians and gearheads and all the industry stuff. And I was like, okay, well, let's see what this is about, and let's see what everybody's talking about. And what everybody was talking about was moving from LA to Nashville. because I was going to go back to LA. I was like, isn't that where you go to make your dreams
Right.
come true in music? And then people were like, no, don't do that.
They're like, that's where dreams go to die. Is that
Like everybody's moving out of LA and everybody's moving to Nashville. And
interesting?
Mapex, who I work with, that company is based in Nashville, and they're based in Mount Juliet, Tennessee. And the artist relations person at the time, Joe Hibbs, rest in peace, he told me, he said, if you move to Nashville, you will have work. And I said, he goes, so move to Nashville, be a part of what's growing. And I said, okay.
Right.
So that next February of 2015, I packed up and moved to Nashville. I think I was,
So how long from that suggestion from him to when you moved? How long of a time period was that?
let's see, I think it was Winter NAMM. So it might have been a year.
So a year to kind of get things together and then
Yeah.
get out there
Yeah.
and go. So was he right? Like, did you walk in and it was like all these glorious gigs came falling in your lap? What did it look like?
I don't know if you'd say glorious, but there was music. There was music happening in
Right.
Kansas City at the time. I was in so many bands, and I think I had even 2 odd jobs just to make the music
Mhm.
scene work. And I was like, I can't be doing this anymore. I need to have, work smarter, not harder, and have less gigs, but make more money. And in
Amen.
Nashville, there were gigs to be had, and
Yeah.
they were paying in the tourist nation capital. It's like the capital of tourism now, so that's where a lot of the
Right.
money was coming from. And so I was like, okay, well, this is a party. If this is what it's going to be like, and I went around and I shook people's hands and I made myself seen and I sat in whenever I could just to show people like, hey, I'm here. I'm Kelsey Cook from Kansas City and I'm in Nashville. Let's go. Let's go.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just really wanted to represent Kansas City and represent myself. And I played in cover bands, the 4-hour cover gigs.
So you were doing like the Music Row, or not Music Row. What's
Broadway
that
Street.
Like Broadway Street. Thank you. Broadway Street, like wild gigs all night, nonstop. Was that what you were doing the whole time? I thought at one point you were touring as well.
Yeah,
weren't you?
yeah. When I first got in,
Okay.
it was like, that's what I did. I went to the bars and I sat in.
Just
Yeah, I played a blues
going.
shuffle and they were like, "You're in." I was like, "Okay."
That's what it takes.
I mean,
You're like, I can do other stuff, guys.
yeah,
Look,
I
look.
guess that was the one thing that a lot of people couldn't do. So I'm grateful for my education and my teachers who showed me, there's Texas Shuffle, there's the Kansas City Shuffle, there's all kinds of feels, and it's not just about playing the drums. It's about how does it feel and how can you get people to dance, because essentially then you make some more money.
Well, and I've seen that too, especially in the rock world where you get like a really great rock drummer, like they know their stuff in rock, but for them to switch to hip hop or to do like a hip hop based rock song, any of those kind of things. There was one drummer I worked with just could not get, it just wasn't in him. And, I don't know if he just needed to study it or he just wasn't versed with the language of that rhythm, but it is interesting. But that was one of the first times I was like, cause I'm not a drummer, where I was like, oh, okay. So I just assumed all drummers play all things, but that is not the case.
Yeah, that seems to be an assumption of drummers, that we do it all. And I can do it all, but it's going to take some work, and I, like I said, education is just so important. And being able to have that and go to a place that I've never been before has nobody that I know, and have that fundamental education to get myself where I wanted to be. That was really a staple.
Yeah. So when you're playing these 4-hour nonstop shows. There's really the only place in Kansas City I know that really does that is Tin Roof, where they call it the Nashville style or whatever. What were some of the things just out the gate you started learning while you were doing those kinds of sets?
How to not over drink. One.
Very valuable tool.
Yes.
I had to learn that lesson myself as well.
Yeah.
And I learned my lesson that I can't smoke weed and perform personally. I know people who can, but yeah, that's it.
Yeah. I mean, everybody's partying and you're just like, and by drink.
So you get there and you're like, this is totally cool party. Let's just keep hanging out. Shot.
It's 10:30 in the morning because of course music is going 24/7 and it's like, oh, well, time to give the band a round of shots. And I'm just like, I literally woke up just like 2 hours ago. And you know what? I don't even just mean alcohol. I even mean drinking water or drinking Red Bull or any kind of liquid, because if you have to pee, there's no,
as the drummer,
there's no chance really, unless you see a friend, and you're like, like, come on, I need to pee. Like, hear the.
It's like, I know this shuffle, bro. Get up here.
I hope you know this shuffle, bro, because I gotta go.
You're like, actually, I don't care. Whatever. Just get.
Yeah.
That is true, because I remember the first time we did like a 4-hour gig, no breaks. We ended up having to build in where like I would do acoustic song, like a Tennessee Whiskey or something like that. So everybody, like the drummer, like Daniel and everyone, could take a break. And then they did Turn Down for What as an instrumental, and we tracked the Little John part where they just got the crowd going so I could run off and pee like halfway through.
We got to take care of each other.
So absolutely. So that's interesting. So no Red Bull, no water. So you just ran around sober and slightly dehydrated.
I wish
that's how you want to be.
I wish that's how it started. That's the smarter way to go. Unfortunately, I went the other way where it was just drink after drink. And, but I am grateful because I did quit drinking in 2019.
Like all together.
All together, I decided that it was too much. It was just too much. And I said, I can't do this anymore. And it was getting in the way of my profession. I wasn't just playing the drums as a hobby. I wanted to keep going and be more and more professional. And every drink I took I was getting less and less professional. And I had to make that decision because it just wasn't working the way that it was going. And I saw some videos of myself, and I'm thankful that they didn't surface, for too long. But it was a perspective. I needed that perspective to see myself on the outside and say, is this what I want? Or, am I going to continue like this? And there were other factors too, but really my profession of music and drumming was what got me to commit to not drink and be a crazy person.
Right. And that's a huge thing. I have multiple friends who are sober and live this music life. I look at it like, I don't even know how you can be 100% sober in this.
Well,
lifestyle.
I wouldn't say 100%.
It really well, it's in that regard of like, I can see not drinking. I know some friends who have rules where they will not drink while performing. So they'll have drinks afterwards. But I do have some friends who are just completely dry. And this lifestyle that's very tough in almost every environment. Even if you're doing like high end corporate stuff, like hell, they got better tasting alcohol there, and a lot of them are trying to get you to drink all night too. But then, it can take its toll on your body, on your mind, and then on the performance too, which gets really scary because that threatens everything.
Yeah. And if music comes first to me, then my sobriety also has to come first, because hand in hand. But, I think we need to enjoy ourselves. So I am not saying that everyone should, just clean out their whole lives and just be raw vegans forever. But, or straight edge, straight edge. And you know what? That's cool too. But for me, I'm like, well, I'm going to take out what doesn't serve me and put in what does. And, I like Mary Jane.
No, that's good.
I love Mary Jane, actually. um, and yes, but responsibility is what I've learned from
Right.
my recovery. And I try to apply my responsibility to my life. And so if I'm using any kind of substance, even if it's caffeine, like caffeine can get me so anxious that I'm not functioning like I want to function either. So I got to be real mindful of what I put in and because that's what I put out.
Well, it sounds like you hit a spot of like heavy self-reflection to be able to start analyze those things. Was that new for you to like take that inner journey, or has that been a part of your life, like asking these deeper questions of yourself and observing yourself in that way?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. And thanks for recognizing that, because I have in the past 5 years gotten deeper into my spiritual self and getting kind of that garbage out. And I just really think that if I can be honest with myself and say, yeah, this is who I truly am, before I started consuming all these things, whether it's physically consuming it or mentally consuming it, that I have to stay true to myself. And if it works for me, then essentially I think that I'm doing okay. But ever since I was younger, I've always been asking the deeper questions and things like that. And thank goodness for music, because we're able to express that spiritual self.
Right.
And yeah, I just, the past 5 years has really been like going up, just keep
Awesome.
leveling up. And I'm grateful to be back in Kansas City because my family's here and I'm making a lot of new friends. And of course, seeing my fellow friends that I had before I moved away. So
Yeah, that was wild that night at O'Dowd's when Daniel's like, Kelsey's coming. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. I can't remember if like I thought you were even here or not at that point. And then, excuse me, Sharon coming back to the city. So what ultimately got you here? What drew you back to the Kansas City music scene? Because like early in your story, obviously you were saying you were kind of piecing things together to survive. What is it about Kansas City now that says like, hey, move back and expand your career here?
yeah, well, I had some personal downfalls within my relationship, and I won't get into too much detail, but I said to myself, what do I really want to do? And it's not just drumming anymore. It's more of representing who I am and what I do and where I'm from. And Kansas City is where I'm from. And in the past 10 years, Kansas City has grown into this joyful, competitive, like amazing center to be. And when I saw kind of how Nashville was going, it wasn't what I represented. And so it was hard to continue to be there and not drink, and it kind of felt a little bit insane. And, where you just keep doing the same thing and you're not getting any different results. And so I was like, well, I gotta go back home. And I was welcomed and it was all good. But prior to that, I was on a musician's competition that was a horrible personal experience, but an amazing experience for growth in the music scene.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wait, so you say competition thing, is it like a drummer's version of American Idol type thing? Is that what
It was
you're?
actually called Project Supergroup.
Okay.
And it is basically fundamentally, how do you put bands together?
Hmm.
And so you'd have five drummers, five singers, five bass players, five guitar, and then you'd put each drummer, each musician into a band. So there's 25 musicians and five bands. So
Mm-hmm.
you get put with these musicians that you've never met before, and then they're like, okay, you got to create a name for your band. You got to, tell people what their roles are, who's the like band leader, who's, going to help write the lyrics, who's going to do this, who's going to do that. And I was just loving it. I mean, I helped create the name of the band. I was like in my creative zone. And I was just like,
Yeah.
I've never had that as a drummer. Usually I'm just the drummer that, either I'm disposable. If I'm playing
Right.
for an artist, I'm kind of disposable because it's about them. But when you have a band, each person has a role. And my role was not
Mm-hmm.
just to play the drums, it was also helping with the lyrics. I find myself being more poetic than I thought I would be. So
Pretty
in
cool.
the music world, it really put me into this fun, creative place. But personally, I was struggling with taking on other people's problems and trying to be an
Mm.
advocate where an advocate wasn't even being listened to. Yeah.
Interesting.
So reality television is not what it seems, as many know, but if anyone's listening that thinks it's real, it's not. Spoiler alert.
So they're filming you this whole process
Yeah.
that you're going through. Did that eventually come out?
It
That
did.
your season?
Unfortunately, there was a poor contract. It was not a good contract. And the
Okay.
contract started,
That sounds like reality TV as
yeah,
well.
contract started changing, and we had no say in
Mm.
anything. We were just kind of being used. And um I don't really have anything on my social media that has any content with any of that stuff, because like I said, if I'm going to try and put myself out there, it's got to represent who I am. And that
Right.
show, although it taught me a lot, it didn't represent who I am
Hmm.
and what I do. But yeah, it's
I remember I had this is years ago. I got through the American Idol like process and got like the golden ticket or whatever, and they're taking you back and you're signing like reading through the contracts, all this kind of stuff. And I remember reading this one clause where they said they have the right to change your story, basically. And I was like, what? And sure enough, that year I ended up not even going. It was dumb. I should have gone and done it because I probably would have learned something great. But the people that I met that day, they had just met each other as well, like two different guys, and they both got through as well. And I saw them on TV, and mind you, they had met that day, but instead their story on TV was that they are longtime best friends and that they were encouraging. And I'm like, no shit. They just made up like a whole story. This is wild. And like, I was like, this was like late 20s. I had no idea, like how that stuff worked. And reality TV was pretty, new at that point. I was blown away. Was that kind of some of the things they were wanting to do, like shape you guys in a perspective that is just not even reality at all?
Well, no, actually, I represented myself, and they decided if they wanted to show it or not. So they could have, in cancel culture, I guess you could say that they kind of canceled me. I might have not been what they wanted to put out there. I thought I was giving great content, you know.
You're like, I was great. What are you guys thinking about? Let's talk to this producer.
Yeah. Well, and then there's that. If you have money in the game, it's no longer a competition. That's what I believe. And once I found out that there was money in the game, and I'm a very competitive person.
You're like, all right,
I was like, I want to win, but I don't have money.
So literally, like, people in the show were paying to. That's, again, wild.
It's just not. It's not right.
I see those things. Yeah, I definitely have reached a point in my life where there was a time where I went through like a private audition for like Voice and things like that as well. And I really thought like this could be a really cool path. I have friends that actually just a few weeks ago, I had a friend named Corey Jackson who was on Team Blake of The Voice, you know, and Cassie Joy. I think you're probably familiar with her. You know, they've gotten a lot out of it, but I just look at it now where I'm like, man, it can take you down a road. Like they were smart enough to like leverage it and found a way through it, but it seems like it's eaten up a lot of people as well. And then I have some friends who went on and they get out of it and they just can't leverage, you know, what it is. Because it's tough. It's a weird, that whole world's a weird world. But it seemed like it opened this creative flow. You were talking about like you know, as a drummer, you're getting into the lyrics, made me think about like our band's writing sessions. Now we write, all of us collectively, and Daniel and I spend him and I actually spend most of the time, him and I, writing because of just our schedules allow for that.
I think that's awesome.
And it's been cool to see him like singing melodies, like he's come up with some of the hooks and, you know, all those pieces. And I love that because I know, and he'll be working with me with like the rhythm of my phrasing and like wanting to get me to count and shit like that. I'm like, count? I never count. I'm a lead singer. I don't come to find out lead singers have to count too. But, so is that something on your radar then, as you're here in Kansas City? Are you looking for like where you can contribute in that way?
Yes, I definitely want to contribute in a band setting, even a collaboration band. And if I'm actually thinking about maybe creating my own, you know, that's what artists do. They create their own thing. And as a drummer, I'm like, well, you know, I can play for artists here and there and represent them. And I love who I'm playing for and what I'm playing. And if I don't love who I'm playing for or what I'm playing, you know, then I just have to make those good decisions to then, you know, transition into something that I do like. But for so long, I've been a little bit unsatisfied or dissatisfied. And now I'm like, well, maybe I just need to do it my damn self.
That's all. Like go find a singer, recruit a singer.
Yeah.
This is what we're doing, and get them in a room. I
or
love
like
that.
what you and Daniel are doing. There's two people, and you're creating something together. Because, you know, during the pandemic, I didn't touch my drum set, and I tried to figure out why. And for me,
that's
the reason I love music and the drums is not just about playing and all the great things that come with it. It's actually the people I play music with, and the audience, and the collective effervescence, that energy. And when that was gone, I lost a bit of myself and realized, okay, if this is why I make music and do what I do, well, the people in my life need to matter and be very important.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of my goal now is to, you know, get with a friend and work on music, create ideas. But essentially, if you have this collaboration project, you have an entity, which of course would involve me and probably another person. And you call that something, you call it whatever you want, but then you collab and you say, this is the entity collabing with Run With It.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
it's two entities. It's not, you don't have to keep recreating one thing to try and get to another. You can just have your entity and create it with
Mm-hmm.
others who have already created their entity, you know?
Well, rappers know this so well, like with the collaborations and how jumping on each other's songs only benefits each other
Exactly.
as long as you're running with in the same
Yep.
direction, you know, and you find artists who have the same focus. I love that kind of stuff. We actually had our song "It's Not Over." There's a Kansas City based rapper named the Royal Chief. He's phenomenal. We you know him?
Daniel has talked to me about him. Yeah.
Yeah, he's great and building an incredible brand. Everything he's doing, very authentic. And you know, he sat in on one of our things. But I love what you're talking about. Like that kind of stuff gets me excited. Like where you see everyone coming together. I think one thing we've been talking about in the band, we had our writing session 2 days ago again, and about the uniqueness. Like when you get these people together, you know, like for us, it's the five. I just had Ashley Page from Flat Susan, if
Oh,
you're
yeah.
familiar with them. And so and we were talking about that same concept where like when you get all those ladies in a room together, there's something special that can only happen when you have those people in the room together. And for some reason that then is going to overflow and impact other people in a very unique way. I think the other piece I love about it too, and you know what it's like to live as a gigging musician and like playing gigs, gig to gig to gig is how I help feed my family. Right. So I'm not mad at it, but when you think about from a business perspective, there's no long-term wealth there. It is us until we're 65 playing in a fucking bar or wherever we're playing or a private show or, you know, whatever it is. When we're talking about these pieces, you're creating this, like there's potential for actual long-term wealth building there. I don't know if that's a piece that is a motivating factor for you, but that is something in this, you know, creating your own thing. That's something that's been really inspiring me too.
Yeah, definitely. The slipper check. Have you heard of slipper checks?
Slipper
Yeah,
check?
where you
No,
you put
I'm
on
not
your
familiar.
slippers and then you go out, you know, and you get your check from the mail. That's
Uh,
the slipper check.
I was thinking you were talking about a band slipper check. Yes, I want some slipper
You know what
checks.
I mean?
I'm trying to build some slipper
You
checks.
know, and that's something that's a realistic idea. It's just you have to, you know,
Mhm.
with the music industry right now where money is not being accumulated through streaming or any kind of,
Right.
you know, physical thing anymore. I mean, I think it's coming back, which is good. But if you're talking trying to make revenue by creating music and getting those slipper checks, it's really difficult.
Yeah,
So,
it is a tough game.
to make money while you're not making money, that's the goal. You know,
Amen. Amen.
however we could do it, smarter, not harder. That's kind of my motto right now. And because I've worked so hard and only gotten so far, and now it's like, well, how do I, you know, navigate this music industry and all its essences and changes and complications? I really
Mhm.
think it's about being smart together, putting everybody on the
Right.
same page and being like, if we can do this, maybe it will, you know, ripple out and it will be the new norm where musicians are getting paid for their content, for their efforts. I mean, why
Mhm.
not?
Well, and that is interesting because if everyone, I think the problem is sometimes everyone's not on the same page. So there are bands that will just take a certain amount, you know, where I had someone try to book our band recently for a price where I was just like, oh, wow. Like that's what I get paid for solo stuff, you know, like, but there are bands who will do it. Now, maybe they're at a part in their career where it makes sense. Cause you know, for Run With It, we were just getting started. We were playing anywhere and
Yeah.
everywhere. But it is tough to kind of raise the bar of like what is expected. And but also I think the other side of it is bands making sure they're stepping it up from a value. Cause I have seen, and I've been guilty of it before myself, but this sense of entitlement of like, I play music. Well, it's like, I know bands, you are in some of bands that are making a crazy amount of money, but they're putting a lot of fucking work into it. And there's a lot of production, and there's a lot of like, they're asking themselves every day, how can we get better? What value can I bring? What, as you're stepping into this and obviously stepping into bigger and bigger echelons, what are some of the things that you see as opportunities for people to build value as an artist?
Building,
and as a band?
yeah, building value as an artist, I think starts just from the artists themselves, like you said, and being able to put in the work, being able, right? Like you said, we have to feed our families. So
Right.
how do we put in the work if we're busy doing other things, or, you know, distracted by one thing or another, or being consumed by social media? It's really tough to then go out and say, here's what I'm worth. But if I can say my opinion on that, I would say that it's about the people who are on top too. You know, we can be
From venue side,
yeah.
or
Yeah.
okay,
Like,
yeah.
I guess I don't want to look at that being as on top. Like, but it's almost like this, you have to climb. And it just, sometimes it just doesn't feel right that the people who have the power aren't helping the situation. And we can only do so much as artists and musicians, and we kind of just take what we can get. But then there's a matter of like respect even. And
Right.
and there seems to be a disrespect when it comes to what they're offering and what something is worth, not just as an individual thing, but music in general. I think we need to be investing more into our musicians and to our venue. Then the venues need to, you know, because if they can build us, then we can build them, and then we have a
Right.
good community. So I can get kind of cynical when it comes to like that kind of stuff, but I try to stay positive, and I try to say, how can we work together? I don't want to work for anyone. I don't want to be
Amen. Oh,
that,
so
you know,
true.
I want to work with. And so that's the whole
Yeah.
collaborating idea, is just working together and cheering each other on. And, you know, because our favorite bars, you know, like Record Bar and places like that, you know, if they can help us, then we can help them. But
Right.
at the end of the day, who's helping them get what we need? And I'm not really that far into that kind of the business side, but I'm gonna be, because I want to be, you know.
Right. Well, and I think that's the struggle, because, you know, on their side, you know, it's like they're trying to keep the lights on, pay the bills, you know, all those pieces too. And it's like this dance where a lot of people have asked me, is like, is the venue's responsibility or the band's? And I'm always just like, yes,
Both.
like, I think, cause I've seen venues that are terrible at promoting. Like, we actually rolled up on tour to a venue where they didn't even know we were
Yep.
coming. Like, somehow the ball got dropped, which also taught me a good lesson of advancing shows. I was terrible at advancing shows at that point. So I was like, okay, we just learned a lesson. But then I've also seen venues that are great, and then you get a band who's just like, whatever, you know, not putting that in. But yeah, it's like, I think, and I'm hearing from venue owners as well, where they're like, just, it goes a long way just seeing the band try, even if the show doesn't go 100%. You know, I even had one owner, I felt terrible about how I was promoting for a solo gig I was doing, because I didn't do as much as I wanted to. And the owner, she came up to me and she's like, honestly, most artists just don't do anything. And I was just glad to see you doing something. I was like, that's the bar, like doing something. So I really think, I guess my perspective is like seeing it seen both sides on the original side, especially like elevating both things. But I do think there has to be a respect. And cause like I try to always ask like ownership, like take ownership like that. Like I showed up to a place in Tennessee that didn't know that we were coming. Well, they've dropped the ball, sure, but I dropped the ball too. Like I should have advanced it. Like that should have never happened either on my end. So it's like, where can I do that? But then also knowing like there's some places and people I just don't want to work with anymore. Cause like you said, I can feel like you can just feel it. There's no respect here. Like I'm just a cog in the machine that you don't care about. And that sucks. Like, I don't want to do that shit anymore either.
Yeah.
You know, the partnering.
Yeah. You're worth more
What
than
does
that. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. On that, the worth piece for you, what's that journey been like? And I say journey because it's been a journey for me. I don't know if it has been for you, but I'm curious what that looks like for you to like take ownership of your value, like what that journey has been to getting to a place where like, no, I should be respected. And this is what I deserve kind of deal.
Yeah, of course. I think that it's important to know that everything is worth something, you know, and doing things for nothing will show you what you're worth. If you can do something for nothing and give everything, then I think that shows good character. But how long can you do that, right? How long can you sustain doing something for nothing? And people will love you for it, but love doesn't pay the bills, right? So doing something for nothing for so long will show you what you're worth. And by that I mean, how do you show up when you're not getting anything in return? How do you present, your professionalism if you know that you're not getting paid? Well, when you're doing it willingly, usually all those things in my world are set to the top. It's like, how can I be the best version of myself? How can I give my best self? And then you start doing it so much that you're getting taken. Things are getting taken from you. And you're not just giving anymore, things are being taken. And that's when I finally realized, okay, what am I worth? And I started putting things on paper and writing down even what gear do I have? What have I invested in myself that can show somebody, hey, here's why I think you should invest in me. And part of that is also education. Having an education, I think I am worth a lot. And that's not just because education is expensive, but because of what I was given in my education and how I use it to work with the people that I work with. And unfortunately, if it's not there, if the funds aren't there to give me what I'm worth, it's been hard to say no. To say no, that's, I can't do that because I need more.
Yeah. It is a hard thing. I'm just trying to soak that up. It's just a really interesting perspective. I don't know if I've heard someone say it the way you did, where it's like, if you do something for nothing long enough, it'll show you what you are worth. And that, as I reflect on my own career, that it's a very fascinating concept. And it reminds me of that, like, I guess it's Robert Frost, like the best way out is through, where it's like, it is part of that journey is starting at that bottom rung and going through the shit. And I think you've probably met, and I've met some people who didn't have to, and they're often not really great people to be.
Yeah. Around. That's where your character comes in, if they know that they're getting something already and they come in and they just don't do a great job, then they don't care. All they care about is what they're getting in return. And
right.
I have been there as well. I'm not going to say that I haven't, done some things in like the handbook that's like, do not do this. Well, I've done it. I've
Right.
done the things.
I
I've
feel
done
you.
those things, but that's how you learn is
Absolutely.
but if you don't make the changes, then you'll just stay that way. And I am a creature of change. For some reason, I just, as soon as something is off, I'm like, let's try something else.
Right. Best thing to like, and it's interesting. I'm in a season of kind of reassessing the business end of what we do. And I'm like, well, we've been trying this for X amount of time and it's not working. Okay. Like the simplest answer is do something completely different than that. If it's not, or sometimes it's just like, it's not working the way I want it to, but it is working. Okay. What is there a smaller thing we need to change? Each little step along the way. Yeah. That concept though, man, I just keep in my brain, keep coming back to it of doing something for long enough. Is that how you said it? Doing something for long enough will show you how much
Yeah,
value you
doing
have.
something for nothing. Because for
Hmm.
example, I was told by a mentor of mine that said, you should have at least 2 gigs that you do for charity
Hmm.
a year, or like that way you can give back, right?
Yeah. Is that Dennis Rogers?
No, no.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, he may have said that, but it's this idea that if you can give, you can't give what you don't have. But if you keep giving
Hmm.
what you have, you won't have it anymore. If nothing's giving you anything back. And that's why I think it's a good balance to have service work, and then
Hmm.
also, of course, do what you need to do to make the bills. But when I give service, I my intention is not to get anything back. And so
Right.
that's kind of how I look at everything now, except I do know what I'm worth, and I have to communicate that to the person I'm working with so that they
Yeah.
realize that this is a business and we do need to take care of each other. And they're not going to want to take from me because it's not going to be good.
Hmm.
you know, when things get taken from me, it doesn't feel good. So it feels good to get compensated, but then it also
Right.
feels good to give back. But yeah, if you give too much of what you have and you don't get it back, well, unfortunately that can get lost. And that's a sad
Yeah.
day for a musician.
Well, that's
Yeah.
true. On with the pricing and everything, that's what helped me is honestly just booking the band more and more with bigger and bigger gigs. Cause it was that reality now where like we got offered a gig a while back as well, where the number I thought was low for a day rate was actually what they were giving for the whole week because there was like a miscommunication in numbers. And so I was like, well, maybe we can make this day rate work. And it was like, no, that's the week. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry, we cannot make that work. And it wasn't even a thing of like, I'm mad at them. Like that's all their budget was. That's great. It was just like, I can't pay myself with that, let alone ask all these other people to, like, cause yeah, there's this responsibility now when you have this group. It's like, okay, what are they getting paid for their time? And like, then all the other logistics of gas and food and hotels and, all that stuff where luckily that's helped me. I struggle more with my solo stuff. Cause like sometimes my solo stuff, I'm like, I could just do this. I'll make a quick, but or whatever. Where with the band anymore, I'm like, nope, we cannot do that. Cause I got a little spreadsheet that tells me I'm in the red
Well, good for you.
when this happens,
Good for you for being able to step out of that solo
Yeah.
mindset, because you're right. We can endure a lot on our own. But when it
Hmm.
comes to working with others, I'm sure you've experienced it makes it much easier on you. But like you said, it's
Right.
a responsibility to take care of each other. And that's the
Hmm.
disconnect I think we have right now between musicians and venues because they don't see
Right.
the paper that you're seeing, I don't think. And if
Right.
they are seeing it, are they choosing to, I don't want to say the word disrespect, but I mean, if you ask somebody for what you need and they say
Hmm.
no for whatever reason, I mean, I'd like to know the reason. I'd like to know, if there's money to be spent, spend it on quality products. And to me,
Yeah.
unfortunately, there's not as much quality going out because the people who are paying for it aren't paying what quality is. And that's not to
Right.
say that people who are playing for lower than their rate or lower than what I would think is appropriate, that doesn't mean they're not good. It just means
Right.
it's not changing. The whole thing was like, I'll throw out a number, $100 for 4 hours, right?
That makes me cry.
That number,
Yeah. Yeah. It's
yeah, I
true though.
have friends that are, in their 70s and they talk about how that was the same rate that they got when they were playing
Hmm.
music.
I just had a friend who was playing like 20 years ago, and I was telling him about this one gig that they offered the week rate that I thought was the day rate. And he goes, "Oh yeah, my band played gigs just like that back in the 90s." And he said it was the exact same rate. And I'm like, that's fucking nuts. Well, and like you said, you get, in some regard, you do get what you pay for. I'll turn it back on the artists themselves in a minute, but there's an agent I know is working with a venue, and this venue was paying X amount of dollars. And they found out another venue was paying half of that. And so it called up the agent and said, "I'm thinking about doing this. And we're going to go to half." And the agent, respect to them, they said to them, they're like, "Listen, go look at the artists that they have playing for them." And they went and looked, and they were artists who were just getting started out. So, and maybe that's a better way to say it. Not like they were terrible. They were just getting started. They're learning how to perform. They're learning like how to interact with the crowd. They're learning their chords, that kind of stuff. And they're like, "Oh, that's different." He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "So if you decide to cut your rate, those are the only people who are going to stay." Or basically, like he was trying to tell him, like, all the artists I bring in for you are not going to pay for
Right.
that rate. And you like these artists. And luckily that venue was like, "Oh, okay, never mind." And they still expanded to another day at the rates they were paying. And that was really cool to see that. But then I think that flip side is, I think when you start getting, better money, it starts making you think different too as an artist. It's like, oh, how can I up my game? How can I do better production? I know for us, like we're developing like our bass player is developing an entire light show synced up with every little beat, those kind of
Yeah.
all these pieces where it's like, okay, if we're getting paid better, better fucking bring it now,
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's a good point where you said about what they give, they get. So if they're not giving that much, then they're not going to get that much. And it just dawned on me, I'm putting all this weight on other people, but what about us having the standard? If we all help each other and say, look,
mm-hmm.
musicians, like we need to set the standard, not just on paper, but like follow up with the work, follow up with the professionalism. And if we set that standard, then we are responsible for what we say yes and no to. And I think,
like that.
but that does take work. It does take, I've been really into contracts right now, to protect myself, to protect my friends, to protect each other, to protect the bands that I play with so that I don't mess up. And, so even having a contract for myself so that I can hold myself accountable and set that boundary. Because once you set that boundary, I do think that it's easy to just keep going up rather than be stuck or go backwards or or what have you. But yeah, I think it's our responsibility as musicians to be the best we can and to work with each other. And I tell my friends all the time, I'm like, hey, just put it down on paper for this person. Just communicate in a
Yeah.
way. For example, if I'm playing for an artist and they don't tell me if I need a drum set, they don't tell me if if I'm going to have to drive myself. These are questions that happen every single gig. It's not like they get it's like I
Gotta make a
yeah,
template, like, and fill in the dots. Yeah. So they
and
actually know.
then
No,
and
I
then at
feel
the
it.
end it says if you answered yes to all these questions, this is what I need. But at
Yeah.
least they can look at it and be like, "Oh, okay. You're asking a lot of things. They're asking a lot of things from me, and all I'm asking
Right.
is, you know, for that compensation." And then at the end of the day, if they say, "Look, we love you, but we can't spend that kind of money," then I say, "Okay, well, that's okay. I
Yeah.
hope you find what you're looking for." But I can't lower my standards, because if I lower my standards, then the standards are lower for everyone, I think.
That's really cool. I like that idea of like raising the standard collectively. That's one thing. So we recorded a lot. Josh Gleave out in Nashville. Are you familiar with
Maybe.
him? He's from Kansas City. It was funny. He's from Kansas City, moved to LA as a producer. And it probably during that exodus you're talking about, he moved to Nashville and he's like, I love it here. It's like he found his spot, and a brilliant producer. But while we were out there, we would always go record, and we got to meet other producers, other artists, and they pop in the studio and check stuff out. And that's one thing I noticed about, like, you can tell a camaraderie, a deep camaraderie. You could tell an expectation was there that no one had to prove you were good. They assumed if you were here in this room or this studio, you were good. They were looking beyond that. So it was like, if you didn't even come at that standard, they'd be like, oh God, like what's happening? So the standard was like really high just to get in the door. And then from there, they're looking for even more. And they want to pick things apart in a good way, to where, like, I had a friend that we met on the road, and then he was in Nashville. So he popped in, listened to our recording, and he was like, oh, that was really good. I would change this part in here, and I would fix that, and he goes, I'm sorry, I'm Nashvilling all over this, is what he said. But one reason I loved being there was that, like, it wasn't like condescending. It felt very supportive, but like, I believe in you so much. I want to see this better. I wonder, and I gotta be honest, I don't feel that in Kansas City as much, like that accountability piece. Now, I think the community over the last several years has grown of the like love and acceptance, which is really, really cool. I almost wonder, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe you see it, but I almost wonder if we're now in that stage of the relationship where the harder talks, because we love each other so much, start to happen, like collectively, like, hey, why don't you think about this? Well, if you fix this, well, like if you tweak that, and you gotta be open to it too. I don't know if you've experienced that, or if you see that opportunity still existing for us to grow in.
Yeah, I haven't been back for too long, but it has been challenging to go
Mm,
from where I was in my music career and kind of get sabotaged in a way by the relationship I was in, and have to kind of start over. Um, so,
yeah.
I had this momentum, and then I came back to Kansas City, and then I'm like I'm like, where do I put this energy? Where do I put this information? And thankfully, I've had some people who are willing to work with me and give me suggestions on how to approach the Kansas City music scene where it is. And
Hmm.
I've been humbled, and I'm grateful for that, because there's so much competition that sometimes you feel like you have to do everything you can, even if it's not really in your nature. But Kansas City is so genuinely good. And by good, I literally just mean the energy is good. But when you
Yeah.
start to,
And I felt that. I feel like it's shifted over, because I feel like in the past at least for me, my experience was not that. I feel like the last few years, it really has shifted to this kind of beautiful thing of love and acceptance.
Yeah. And it's not just the music, of course, it's the sports, it's the arts, it's all of it. And it all is connected. And I love that. I love, because I played on the Chiefs drum line in 2015, and now they're doing so great, and I'm so proud, and just that great energy. And that is what I am trying to do. I'm trying to get into that now without having this urgency of, why aren't you doing it like this? Like I've been there. I know that it works. Like now I'm trying to come in here, and I don't want to be like, stepping on people, because that's not what it's about. I don't want to bring that kind of energy to Kansas City and corrupt it, because it does not need that, which unfortunately I think happens to small towns that blow up within the music scene in a good way. And it just, it can get corrupt. And I did not want to be a part of that corruption. So now, instead of trying to force my way, I am communicating how I do things. And some people are saying like, oh, well, it doesn't work like that here right now, but that's a cool idea, or that sounds like it could.
Is there an example you feel comfortable sharing?
Yeah, definitely the contract idea. And it's, of course, to protect myself first, but it's also just to protect everyone. I think everyone should have a contract. I have a contract with my parents.
You're giving out contracts everywhere. Like, hey.
And maybe we need to change the name. We might need to change the name. Maybe it needs to just be called agreement. They do call it like a contract agreement, or we can change it if we need to, but something put on paper, and it can be fluid too. I've worked with contracts where it was one-sided and fluid, meaning I signed my life away, and I didn't have a contract for myself that they signed to me. It was a one-sided contract, and that means I had no control. You sign it, and then the paper that they had, they start crossing things out and adding things, changing the name of the whole entity. I'm just like, I didn't sign up for that, So where's the working with, and how am I protecting myself? So that's kind of my example of that contract idea, is even if you think you don't need one, you need one.
Well, and that's funny because on the songwriting end, we're kind of working backwards now. Like I'm going through getting all the information I should have had for songs we wrote like years ago, because we're getting ready to start presenting our music catalog and trying to get into licensing, that kind of thing. And I'm realizing, we were talking contracts Tuesday, where I'm like, it's more about like just communicating so all of us know up front, this is your percentage, this is my percentage, this is how it goes, here's all your numbers, here's your PRO, all these pieces where, we're back engineering now, but even found, especially as you start collaborating, sorry, TikTok came up, I was getting my phone. I'll find it later. There's a app now that someone else, Chad Berkwin here in Kansas City, they use for their songwriting sessions, where everybody got the app. It has all your information, PRO numbers, all these things. And so it just logs the write. And so it just takes care of all the paperwork and all those pieces together, so that, if one day that song finds itself, in a movie, everyone knows what they were going to get paid, from the get-go, and you don't have to think about it anymore. And so that is interesting to think about, like just even that simple piece starts getting people's minds elevated. It's like when you went from getting $300 to $500 for a show, and then from $500 to $1,000 and on and up, it starts tweaking something in your brain where you're like, oh, okay, this is what we're doing now. This is the deal.
Yeah.
Now. It's interesting.
And we got to take care of ourselves so that we can take care of others, right? Like if I'm not protecting myself, how can I protect others? How can I be of service? How can I do what I need to do if I'm constantly worried about being taken advantage of? And that comes from my story. I have a long line of being taken advantage of. And at this point in my life, I'm just saying, well, if there's a solution, even if nobody likes it, because most of the time people who are making a contract, their intentions are not pure. Their intentions are to control.
They're trying to lock
somebody in. And as we've seen with artists like Michael Jackson, for example, I saw recently, excuse me, that he took a step into protecting one of his songs, and he hadn't done that with a lot of his other songs. And I can't remember specifically what had happened or what song it was, but he said, I own this. This is mine. But he had to put in the work. He had to find the information how to protect himself. But even young stars, we hear about them getting taken advantage of, whether it's physically or physically, like I just know that there is a solution. And if I can help be that by representing someone who says, hey, if you want to work with me, I have an agreement that you have to sign. And if it's something that you don't like, then okay, that's okay. Right? Then you just move on and you find what you need. But it's so sad when people get locked in or invest in something and they don't have a safety net. And I'll get candid as well. I got divorced, a contract that you're vowing to your family and friends and a higher power. And then someone just says, actually, no.
No,
like, I'm like, wait a second. Yeah. I didn't think that's how that worked. But again, a contract is only a piece of paper. And we have to put on that paper what we actually feel and think and want and need and put it out there. And we can't be afraid to do that, not afraid to do that just because we're afraid that somebody's going to maybe change their mind, because changing your mind is okay too. And I'm glad that I've grieved my divorce and everything, but it has taught me the importance of not just the contract being there itself, but what do you do when somebody breaches that contract? That is where justice comes in. And that's where you feel good about yourself. You say, I'm so glad that I took that time, even though it was difficult, to tell somebody what I needed and wanted, and they breached it. And so then what are the steps? Because that happens. Yeah. And unfortunately in the music world, we don't have our own lawyers, right? Unless you're at a point where you do. I think that it is important to have that protection and to have a team of people in different parts of the business where you can get help if you need it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because before we craft, before we actually ink these contracts, Don Simon is a lawyer here in town, music lawyer. And he's going to be someone we're running by things, like, hey, what does this look like? And because we actually got locked into a contract a few years back, and I just had somebody who wasn't a music lawyer who had practiced law at some point in their lives to look it over one day. And then it ended with us almost getting sued for a bunch of money. Luckily we were able to work things out with the other entity, but we learned some hard lessons there. But it is interesting when you take that value and put it out there in the world and you stick to that. I think what I've found is that over time, the people who you're supposed to be working with gravitate to you. And it's almost like, for lack of a better term, it's almost like whatever energy you're operating at. Like if you're operating in lower energy, you're just always going to be attracting those lower energy like gigs and lower energy pieces. It's like, as you elevate those things, other people who are doing the same will recognize it and see it and want to partner with you. But it's tough because sometimes there's like a chasm there. There's like a gap where you decide, I'm worth this, I'm this professional, I'm this level, but then there's this gap before everybody else catches up.
Yeah.
Or the opportunities catch up too. And that can get really scary.
Yeah. And negotiating. I mean, people don't talk about that enough. I mean, why we don't, people who hear me talk about contracts are like, Kelsey, you're so matter of fact, you're so rigid, you're this. And I'm just like, well, I'm not saying that we can't negotiate, right? I'm not saying that if you were to come back with me with like a counter offer and I would say, oh, well, I'm willing to invest because it's a great opportunity, right?
Right.
But you still have to have that conversation and to close that gap and be like, it's not just you say no, to everything that doesn't accept you, because then I'm just going to be not working. And that's not the goal.
You're like, I do want to work. Well, slide into the last two questions of the podcast. The first one of those, right now, how would you define living a great life?
A great life is something that I have not always had, but today I take things one day at a time, and I try to make good decisions every day for myself so that I can make good decisions for the people in my life based off of what I am doing. I can't make decisions for them, but if I can make good decisions for myself, then it sets up a good foundation for greatness. And, there's a saying, fake it till you make it. And I'm like, no, don't fake it. Be it. Be it until you become it. Because I've faked things my whole life. I've faked so many things, and it didn't get me here. It got me into misery. It got me into bad relationships. It got me into a lot of things that I didn't want to be in. And so when I think about living a great life, I think about being great so that I can give what I have. And like I said earlier, I don't think you can give what you don't have. So if you're not giving yourself greatness, how can your life turn out to be great? So it might sound a little selfish, but I believe we need to take care of ourselves, and I try to take care of myself every day and have those routines so that I can wake up and feel like I'm living a great life if I feel great. Now, when I don't feel so great, my life is still great because of the people around me who I have kept with me through the good and the bad. And those are people that I call on for help, and mentors and teachers and friends. And they are what make my life great. So, I think if I can be better day to day and do better, then, I believe I'm a success. And then I can be of great service to the world. So that's kind of what my life looks like right now. And I do think is pretty great. So thanks for asking.
That's awesome. No problem. Yeah. And I love that too. You really do have to have a discipline of investing in yourself. To pour out your cup, you have to get it filled, and that's a great perspective. I love it. For the last question, right now, how would you define creating great things?
Ooh. Well, again, to create something great, I believe you have to find that greatness in yourself. And, It's so hard because what is greatness? To me, greatness is being the best version of myself. And with that, I'm being honest, I'm being truthful, and therefore what I'm giving out has great intention. So if I have great intention, then anything that I do end up creating just happens to be great. What I think really is a lot of what people may think greatness is what comes from it, and again, if I can give it, it doesn't necessarily matter what other people think because I'm already there. I've already given it. I already am great. And so if I'm going to be creating something great, I always got to look within. And I can't be looking on the outside because as soon as I look on the outside, my greatness turns into grievance. And I start grieving who I used to be and why am I not this and why can't I be that? And so I try to really live a simple life in terms of how I think and how I live and taking one day at a time. But having that genuine intention is really important to me when I'm creating, because there are times where I'll create something and it doesn't feel genuine and I'll just not put it out there. And that's okay too.
You're like, meh.
Huh?
You're like, meh, I guess I don't.
And that's okay because sometimes it's not great to
Right.
be transparent, because if you start putting things out there that with bad intention, your greatness doesn't seem so great anymore. At least for me, it seems less, what's the word? Well, I guess genuine. Yeah.
Well, and sometimes there's a difference between authenticity and like full transparency as well. And that's one thing I've got, a lot of times people would meet with Daniel and I to talk about social media. And that was one thing we would talk about as an artist. You have to decide your line, like whatever your line is, make it authentic. But you don't have to divulge your whole life or your whole inner workings or your whole family stuff or all, it's like, and it's funny is the more I've gone, the less and less in my personal life I share and make it more and more about the art perspective. Just because even I had one of my sons tell me, I don't really like when you talk about me online, and it's like, oh, like, cause I would talk about him by name and his experiences. And as he got older, he's like, guess what? I don't enjoy that. And that made me think like, oh, this is not just my life I'm sharing about, or like just really shitty days. Sometimes I just maybe need to keep it in my family and we talk about it,
right.
Put it in a song later or something. That difference between greatness and grievance, I think was a really interesting piece in there too, of like to basically challenge ourselves not to trade our greatness for our grievances. And yeah, that's huge. Well, let people know how they can connect with you and see what you're up to.
Yeah. Thanks, Miguel. Casey Drums on Instagram. I work within that platform mostly. I don't really venture too much further for right now. So that's kind of like my hub. Logos right here. And, I got some YouTube on there, but I'm in the biz right now to make some content. So I'm going to make some great content coming up, and I'm working with some great musicians, great artists in the Kansas City area. And I'm really grateful that you had me on here today to just kind of talk things out. And I'm wanting to help others. So anytime I can be helpful, then I'm here. I'm here for it.
That's awesome. Glad you made the time for it. And as you're making content, I think you need to have a rematch with Daniel Cole, drummer's rematch.
That's right.
From that last
We
piece.
should. Let's go. I think so.
Thank you for listening to the Live and Create podcast. If you like what you heard, make sure you subscribe and leave a comment or a review.
The Live and Create podcast.